Content warning. Opinions are in this video. Making things is hard when you have to do all the work yourself, especially if it is something complicated or requires multiple puzzle pieces to fit just right to become great. The amount of resources and planning needed to create even just one scene of a movie is intense. You can make the best screenplay in existence, but if you can't hear the audio, then what's the point? Just like how there are a team of individuals behind every film or TV show, there is a multitude of people toiling away out of sight to create the stories we love and appreciate in manga. Ajin Demi-Human, or just known as Ajin, is an action thriller created by the minds of Swuh Miura and Gamon Sakurai. Ajin explores the idea of what if there was a group of humans who had the ability to essentially be immortal, reviving upon death whilst reverting whatever harm was inflicted upon them. The only catch is that you only find out you're an Ajin once you die. This necessarily wouldn't be a problem if it weren't for the multiple corporations and governments that want your body for purposes that would definitely not be described as ethically or morally correct. Enter Nagai K, a young student boy who gets forced into a life he doesn't want because in a cruel twist of fate, he is an Ajin. On the bright side, at least he has a spectral familiar to protect him. Oh yeah, Ajins sorta have scary ghost stains called IBM that are unique to each demi-human. See, being an Ajin's not that bad of a deal. Just replace your pre-existing life with being a fugitive and your pet dog with an 8-foot skeleton. Now, it's not unusual for a manga series for the main roles, writing and drawing, to be split between two people. A popular example of this would be Death Note. Oba wrote it and Obata drew it. Ajin had the same structure to its production, with Miura writing and Sakurai illustrating. However, after the first volume, Miura would step down from the project, meaning that chapter 6 onwards, Gamon Sakurai was in charge of both visuals and story. Funnily enough, the first chapter that Sakurai officially wrote himself is titled Fresh Start. Usually when something like this happens, there is a lot of concern from fans in whether the new writer will retain the same quality of the previous one. I feel this situation is more prevalent within other mediums such as novels or film than manga, but maybe that's just me. Luckily for Ajin, it was so early on in its serialization, the transition is hardly felt, which is partly due to the absolutely banging artwork, but let's go over some changes that I noticed between creators. Obviously, all of these are speculative and very much my interpretation. Nagai K is definitely the character that I feel changed the most between volumes. The way Miura wrote him gave the energy of wanting to lean towards a more sociopathic type of character. Multiple times he has murderous tendencies and an overall lack of regard for human life. I don't know, if you say, I'm going to kill and murder people in different ways more than once, I would at least be booking a session one-on-one with a psychiatrist. This very angsty K disappears after volume 1, with more focus on the cold and rational side of his character, and while he still exhibits behavior that could be seen as like psychopathic or sociopathic, it comes off as more as him being selfish and sort of a dick to others. I don't see his earlier version doing the actions he does in volumes 2 to 3. Overall, Nagai becomes a stronger, unique, and more sympathetic character than what was initially envisioned in my opinion. I haven't seen or read High Rise Invasion, the series that Miura worked on after Ajin, so I am pretty unfamiliar with his other works and storytelling style. Ajin starts off very fast-paced, with a lot of action and a lot of things happening. Ripping K straight out of the school setting was a great idea because unless you're doing something really unique, it can be really hard to stand out when everybody and their grandma has a story set within the secondary education system. Volume 2 onwards does slow down a bit pace-wise, but nothing too jarring. It sort of flows naturally without a hitch. In terms of narrative direction, I'm gonna guess that the plotline of K's sister Eriko being kidnapped would have been a lot more pronounced and longer than what we got. I just find it really weird that the last chapter Miura wrote had her kidnapped, and then the next chapter, which again is called Fresh Start, has Sato just giving her back to the hospital. Bruh, why didn't he just steal Eriko's phone if he was gonna let her go straight away? Anyway, other than that, I didn't find any major discrepancies, which is impressive given the lack of communication between authors. More info on that later on. Alright, so I know that the illustrator stays the same throughout the serialization, but man, I just want to shout out Sakurai's art in Ajin. Some of the panels even early on are so cool, and demonstrates the talent that he has as an artist. The humans, they do start off a bit blobby if I have to be honest. Unless it's an adult male, then it's normal looking. The highlight for me, however, are the designs of the IBMs. They are so fucking cool looking with their blend of humanoid and animalistic features. How they look foreign and familiar at the same time is an exceptional choice to add that touch of horror to the identity of the Demi-Humans. I love the way he draws guns. You can tell he loves his first-person shooters. When questioned about his inspirations art-wise in an interview, Sakurai mentioned Akira's creator Katsuhiro Otomo. Maybe that's why I like his art so much. And since we're talking about changes, I thought this would be a good time to talk about the Let's address the extra dimension in the room first. The CGI. CGI gets a bad rep within animation because while it's cheaper to use compared to traditional 2D animation, making it look good is another story. I've seen my share of terrible CGI and oh my, it is horrendous. But when it's used within the right conditions and given the care and attention it needs, it can be stunning. An underground series that you might not have heard of, Demon Slayer, uses CGI very well to portray movement in scenes where 2D animation would have trouble with. With all that in mind, I can confidently say that the Ajin anime passes the CG test. The IBM models are superb, and the action-filled story showcases the strength of 3D animation when studios actually try to use it. My favourite scene is the Sado hallway sequence in episode 5. It's so smooth and dynamic. Season 1 for sure is worth a watch. Season 2 I didn't really care for. Like most anime adaptations that released during the manga's serialization, it went anime original and I did not enjoy the path the story took. To summarize,
thumbs up emoji.
Hey everybody, future Swuh here to tell you what primitive-minded present Swuh could not. The official English release of Ajin, its translation isn't very good. For example, this is the scene where Nagai K says goodbye to his friend, Just Kai. I really need to thank him for everything up until now. Really. Thanks. But there's another reason why I really need Kai's cell phone. Another option, which is the possibility that other Ajin might be looking for me. Eventually, I'll meet up with them. Now let's look at the official translation. Kai is the one guy I owe, and I'll never forget it. All this way. Seriously. Thank you. But there's an even bigger reason I need Kai's cell. The other path, namely, those Demi-Humans must be looking for me, too. And eventually, they'll find a certain person. So I don't know if the official translation gets better in the later volumes, but at least for the earlier ones, stick to the fan translation if that really bothers you. And if you're wondering how the future is, it's pretty much the same. Big Oil still controls the world, and your waifus aren't real. And now, the million-dollar question. Why did Siuna Miura jump off the SS Ajin? I don't know. If Sakurai himself doesn't know, how are we supposed to? I'm going to read a Twitter thread he posted regarding this event. Keep in mind, this is not an official translation, so I apologize in advance for any possible errors. Last month, there was an incident that made me realize that a surprising amount of people are interested in the distribution of work in a manga that has both a writer and an artist. Perhaps works like Bakuman have influenced this curiosity. This probably varies greatly depending on the work, but in the case of Ajin, despite having a separate author for chapters 0 to 5, my duties did not involve much else apart from simply drawing. I would draw the author's rough storyboard as a proper storyboard. There was something similar to this in a Bakuman Omake. Unless I am told something like, "Could you do something about this part?" by the editor or author, I am simply a person who draws. That's why at the point in time I hadn't even actually met the author in person before. I just received the storyboards and drew them. so I felt that it wasn't that big of a deal that we didn't meet up. I actually ended up meeting him only once in a completely unrelated place after he'd left Ajin. I greeted him there. It's often suspected that we split due to fighting or conflict, but there wasn't even timing to where that sort of thing could occur. Furthermore, I myself don't even know why Miura-san came to the decision to leave the work. I'm a careless person, so I never really thought to ask. Writers are only human, so at the time something must have come up that made him have to quit. When I met him, he told me that he's very sorry that things turned out that way. He was a very sincere person. Returning to the topic, it wouldn't be true to say that I didn't have any involvement with the content of chapters 0 to 5. For example, I was the one who came up with the rules for when IBMs fight one another. At the time of Miura-san's rough storyboard, there was no clear rules in place, so I was allowed to propose an idea for what the IBM's special characteristics should be. So what happened to the story after chapter 5? It was truly a blank slate. All that had been decided on from the beginning was stuff like, there'll be an escape and then more and more fights. I thought to myself that Miura-san must be a person that excels in making stories where lots and lots of things happen without worrying about the aftermath. I think that is the greatest charm of Miura's storytelling. However, this is a method in which only Miura-san could tell a story. I can't create a story in the same way. When I was told that Miura-san would be leaving and that I would be in charge of the work as of chapter 6, I had to consider a rough idea of everything that would take place in the story from then on. At the time, I thought about what the answers to the foreshadowing he did would be, what the Ajin and IBMs are, details about the setting, and what kind of people the characters are, as well as their backstories. That's why, from volume 2 onwards, Miura-san's name is no longer in the book. Miura-san himself said that, I didn't write it, so it's no problem that it's not included. He seems to be a gracious person. Regarding Ajin, the distribution of work between author and artist was like this. Again, I think this varies greatly depending on the work, but I don't think authors changing is that strange of an occurrence in the manga industry. Well, if I were to go into the fine details of the work between an author and an artist, it would be way too long. That's why I think it's best to enjoy manga without worrying too much about who is drawing it. There you have it. The biggest insight to what occurred behind the scenes. And Sakurai is probably right. Maybe I should worry less. So I'll shut up for now. See you next time where we talk for 9 hours analysing beans.